everybody. This is Dr. Lori Shemek.
And I'm Omar Cumberbatch. You're listening to This Podcast Burns Fat.
Hey, Lori, how are you today?
I am doing great. Thank you. How is everything there in New York?
Oh, fantastic. No
Yeah?
complaints at all. Yeah, no, we had a interesting thing. I don't know. Last night in New York, there was a possible UFO sighting.
No.
Yeah. So
Really?
yeah, check it out on Twitter. So it's funny.
Okay.
My niece called me and said, I think I saw a UFO. And I'm like, okay, and takes a picture of what she saw. It's a little fuzzy. She's like, I was driving, I just couldn't get it, it's like a good picture. And then I go on Twitter, and there was a whole bunch of people who said they saw the same thing, and they were taking pictures of it too. So
You're kidding. How
no,
fun. I think.
yeah.
I'll
So
definitely check that out.
yeah,
Yeah.
take a look. It's pretty
Okay.
crazy. So that's what's happening in the New York area. Apparently, there's a an alien invasion about to happen any minute.
Yeah. Stay focused on the skies. What did
Yeah.
they say what it was? Was it like a substance?
No, nothing yet. So it was last night. So I don't know how deep they dove into it, but I was just following the people on Twitter saying, like, and just they didn't know, nobody knew what it was. It kind of just disappeared after a while. And the videos that they're showing are like so dark. But there are definitely
Yeah.
lights, and it looks definitely strange. But yeah, I'm waiting like for some more updates on it. Like I know a lot of people
It's not
on
a
Twitter.
balloon, is it?
No, this is apparently not.
Oh gosh.
But
Well, I'm
anyway,
excited today. Our guest is not an alien. She's actually a wonderful human.
that she is.
And it's Ali Shapiro we have for you today. So she's wonderful. She really had a really hard childhood in terms of being ill and struggled with quite serious issues. And she says you don't have to fight your food. She says you don't need to do that anymore. And she has a podcast on this. She has training on it and has been very successful in doing and helping, I guess, so many people.
Yeah, no, she was really a fascinating guest to really put the whole idea of food safety on the table. And again, it's not food safety in the context of like whether or not it's clean. It's really just
Right.
like our emotional attachments to food, and how basically it's one of the hierarchy of needs, really, where at the end of the day, like one of the we need food, and we have to have a general safety feeling around it, which is interesting. But she's gonna dive into it way better than I just explained it. So let's jump into the show.
Okay, sounds fun.
Hey, Ali, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Oh, I am great. I'm so happy to be here with you both.
Thank
So I'm just
you.
really, really excited.
Well, we're happy to have you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. So Ali, could you just give us an idea of your background and why you're here, just briefly, and so the audience knows you, gets to know you a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm really most known for my work called Truce with Food, which is really born out of the genesis of my own personal health reclamation story. When I was 13, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, which is
Oh, no.
Yeah. And Dr. Laura, knowing inflammation, right? It's like
Right.
really, and like I couldn't detox from my system and having a lot of trouble with inflammation. So I went through that, and that was in 1992. Like it's mind-boggling. It was 30 years ago. And not much. I was the first generation of childhood cancer survivors. So the goal was to keep us alive, which is an amazing place to be.
Was it non-Hodgkin's?
It was Hodgkin's. So
Hodgkin's, okay.
yeah, they say it's the good kind. I'm like, why is good luck always in relation to bad luck? It's like, if you're gonna get cancer, this is the kind of get. And so there wasn't a lot of, it wasn't really known what would happen with our health. And basically for the next 10 years, I really struggled with irritable bowel syndrome, depression, acne, and most of all, my battle with my weight that had really started before that really escalated into emotional eating and binge eating. Um, and so by the time I was 24, about 10 years, I had been trying to diet and all this stuff. And at 24, I just was like, I can't do this anymore. It's exhausting. And really ending up trying to end losing weight, the effort to lose weight, it
Mm-hmm.
opened me up to food as medicine, which is what we now know. I know functional medicine is really big in, but this was again 20 years ago. There was no social media. Newspapers didn't really even have health sections yet. Does anybody
It's
remember that?
amazing how we made it through.
Yeah, right. Yeah, my functional medicine mentor had Dr. Jeffrey Bland, who's one of the founders, like on her
Oh
cell
yeah.
phone. You know, it was just like it was a really
Yeah.
small community. And I basically realized that my gut health was really compromised from steroids and chemo, which is now like a no-brainer, but I didn't know that, you know. And so by
Well,
healing,
especially back then, nobody knew the connect. There was literally very little recognition that gut health was impacted by anything we did. It was a separate entity, kind of like we used to think the brain was, you know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I was going to doctors and I was trying all the conventional medicine because the doctors were saying, "Oh, it's your, you know, try this antidepressant." Or for my IBS, they were telling me to take antacid medications, where it was like I figured out I didn't have enough stomach acid. So it was nobody knew much back then.
Mm-hmm.
But really being able to see food as medicine, and this expanded view beyond calories and weight loss was so life changing for me that I really wanted to help other people with it. But then I would find that during times of stress, I couldn't keep up all the healthy eating. And I had almost more frustration and guilt because now I knew how good I could feel. Whereas before, my expectations were just like, oh, you're just going to have to, you know, suffer the rest of your life. Just be grateful you don't have cancer, which again, I am. And I wasn't healthy. Right. Um,
You knew there
and
was
so,
better.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so this question of why can't I keep this up? What is this key to consistency? And stress eating really led me to grad school, and really the last 16 years as a health coach and someone who specializes in change to really get to the root of stubborn change, and specifically with our food and health habits. And that's what I've been doing ever since, with a very healthy relationship to food, and even use the same process to work through, you know, subsequent health issues. I was diagnosed with infertility, because in early menopause, but worked with a naturopath and an acupuncture to get pregnant, and then just went through the menopause transition early. Given the chemo, I'm only 44,
You
but
did.
used
Yeah.
everything I knew to really reclaim my health postpartum and in being postmenopausal. So keep on that spiral staircase of change.
Yeah, like, that's an amazing story. And I just wanted
It
to just
is.
jump back a little bit as well, just to touch base with, absent obviously the medications that you were dealing with at the time. What was your diet actually like at that particular point? And just trying to get a little idea of what other things might have been going on at that time.
Oh, yeah. You mean before I found functional medicine?
Yeah.
Well, it was a classic cycle of like restriction and then overeating. And I wasn't really eating food. I was eating zone bars or like low fat yogurt, right? Like, and again, like all the things that, oh, I remember learning that cancer survivors should be vegetarian. And was trying soy dogs. And I actually since found a different framework that blood cancers actually work better with more meat. So
Is
soy,
that, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
yeah, it's Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez's framework. He's
Mm-hmm.
since passed, but it's really about nervous system balance, and the blood cancers like lymphomas, Hodgkin's, leukemias tend in his framework do better with more meats and fats. So, but yeah, my blood sugar was a wreck, and I was, oh my God, I think of like,
Right.
oh, all the low fat foods I was trying and, the things I thought were healthy, but just weren't. So does that answer your question, Omar? I wasn't really eating real food.
No, absolutely. I love like especially we're around the same age and we all have eaten that, the classic 80s diet,
Yeah.
where, we
And
were
the 80s
growing.
are back, right? Are they going to bring snack wells back? I hope.
Well, this time with fat, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, with that,
Oh. Well,
yeah.
what do you think was one of the turning points for you to then just embark on a healthier life?
Yeah, it was really again, when I recognized that I didn't have to live with these diagnoses. Um,
Mm,
and that was well, I guess a healthier life is, I think, let me back up. I think the problem was I thought I was being healthy because I thought
hmm
health was defined as being thin. And even though the thinnest I ever was during chemo, I couldn't reconcile that difference because the culture at the time, and perhaps still, was to be healthy, you have to be thin. And so I was convinced I wasn't healthy if I wasn't thin. But it was actually just exhaustion that finally made me be like, okay, like thinking about food more, trying to lose weight more is actually not working. And now we have research that the more you try, like
right.
doesn't work. But this again was, there was no body positivity, there was no health at every size. This was just, you diet or you don't. There was no alternatives. So it was really, frankly, exhaustion. I wish it was a more inspiring example, but
No, that is because I think a lot of people get to that point, where they either can't take it anymore, not feeling optimal, right? Having optimal health, or they just give up and they don't feel motivated to do anything. And do you remember watching the movie The Whale? Did you ever see that movie? But it was about a man with obesity, and he just essentially he didn't allow, but he just gave up essentially. And it was a really sad story, but with a good ending in a way. But anyway, yeah, so you can take different paths. And that's sadly one of the most unfortunate ones.
yeah, there's a great Wendell Berry quote. He's a farmer and environmentalist, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but the essence is that, like, when we no longer know which way to go, the mind isn't impeded, and that's when the real work begins. So
Oh,
something
I
along
like
those lines.
that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, there's an opening when we're finally like, I don't know, we're open to new things if we're still trying.
I like that. But when you started on the healthier choices, I guess is a better way to put it. Did you start eating a certain way? Like, were you doing? I know back then there wasn't really low carb except for Atkins, maybe. Were you doing? You said you mentioned vegan diet for a little bit.
Oh yeah, that was when I was still struggling with cravings.
Okay.
The thing that I actually started with that like really changed my life was learning how blood sugar works. And I had this realization that if I felt like crap today, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a really good chance of being healthy in 40 years. So I had to actually feel good today.
Smart.
Right. But I think
Really.
it
Yeah.
was like mind blowing because I realized we have this deeper narrative that health has to be about sacrifice. And that, at the time it was like, oh, if you're healthy, it's beans and tofu and exercising all the time. So really learning about how blood sugar worked and learning for me again how um animal protein and healthy fats helped
Mm-hmm.
both my gut and my blood sugar were
It's
like life
incredible.
changing for me. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I actually can be satisfied if I'm eating the right foods for me. So I really focused more on the physical needs that my body needed, which was like stable blood sugar and gut health. And for me, that happened to be, and especially as a healing diet, had to be more paleo. The big restriction I had to do for really a long time was be gluten free because my gut
Mm-hmm.
just needed a chance. And dairy was really hard for me at that time. And even like raw, like nightshades, like tomatoes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as I've gotten healthier, I can eat all of that stuff again. but it was,
That's the good news.
yeah, yeah. That's the good news. As you heal, your gut is hopefully more resilient. And we know that gut health now, one of the biggest promoters of gut health, this is food variety. It's just having a lot of variety.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so Al, yeah, but just so the audience knows, one of the things that I really enjoyed about your bio was this concept of safety around food. And it's an interesting term. And I know that you have a ton of material. So I just want you to just expand on what that is and a little bit of how it relates to our diet. Because as we spoke about off the air, I've kind of like this personal development journey, and safety in general is like one of the main hierarchies that people want to attain. So can you just dive into it? And then I know we're gonna have a million questions just off this topic, so I just want to use that as like an intro to get into it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'd like to say too, it's not food safety with like bacteria and germs and stuff.
Yeah. Dr.
Yeah.
Lori with the inflammation angle.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah, that would be kind of boring. No,
I
no
know,
offense
right?
to anyone in food safety. But yeah, so I love that you asked this because we can define safety in different ways. And when it comes to food, I really think there's two categories. There's physical safety and emotional safety. And physical safety is are you getting the foods that you need for your body to function, right? Like we forget that nutrition really keeps our body, it keeps the lights on and keeps our immunity up and helps us repair and all those things. So that is part of that. And that's why um, I think understanding how each of our blood sugar and gut health works, that's really those two processes can help you make sure that your body's physically nourished and meets that requirement. And what I found is what people really struggle with is emotional safety. And this is really my background is also in developmental psychology. So if we think of when we're born, we have two primal needs as newborns, all of us. This is like not personal, it's just how it goes, is we need to be touched and fed, right?
Mm.
So we know that we're going to survive if we're fed. And if you think about it, being hungry is really uncomfortable. I don't know about you guys, but I
Mhm.
can't like
Yeah.
not be hungry. And so what we start to do is couple emotional relief with being fed. And hopefully it comes with comfort as well. And so as kids and young adults, even, we can't really make our way in the world, right? Like it took me like maybe like 21 years to be self-sufficient. I wasn't like, crashing at my parents after college. Um, and so as we grow up, our emotional safety is really on, are we being good? Are we pleasing our caretakers? And then developmentally, our friends become really important. And then if you're like me, you've had some jobs, as a teenager, your employer becomes important. So what we start doing is thinking that we're emotionally safe if we're being good. Or I think of it as like, are we chosen, right? And that's
Mhm.
that's great. And we need to come off of, I joke like as adults, we come off the conveyor belt and we want some compass of morality, right? If you're just coming out of the world, you're like, what's good, what's bad? Like that's
Mm.
that's a little bit risky, right? You need to
Mm.
know how to be in the world. But as adults, what we need to do to really secure an adult level of safety is start to belong to ourselves first and identify what are our needs and wants as an adult. And that can be often different than what we grew up with. And I can give you an example of that. I grew up in a home that a great home, which is part of why I think I struggled with my food and not understanding this emotional safety. However, my dad he grew up very poor, food insecurity, was heavy and then lost weight and is still thin to this day. But he grew up saying, like, I'm running from the fat man and was weigh himself every day. Um, and so I just absorbed that. He never put that on me. But I absorbed like, oh, this is how we relate to food, right? Is like trying to be
Mhm.
thin, trying to be healthy. And he wasn't wrong, right? Like it's like it's great to be healthy and eat well. Um, but it was kind of like, oh, this is how I'm good with food, right? And this is how I have to be. I have to always be exercising. I have to always be monitoring my weight. But as an adult, that actually wasn't what was working for me. And so I had to learn a different way of relating to food than I was taught in my family of origin. So that's like one example of like, what do I need to do? And how do I need to change my relationship to food that'll work for me as an adult and as someone who never experienced food insecurity, right? Someone who did struggle with their weight, but also had a different history than my dad. So that's a concrete example of how our needs change as adults based on hopefully, I think all parents want their kids to do better for them themselves than they did, you know? Um, so I'll stop there and pause and see if there's questions.
Well, I do in that I'm just wondering, once you identify how you want to live, is that what you're saying, and how you want to just live your life around food, is there an example you can give us about what somebody might decide to choose for themselves? Is it something like, do they choose a pallet of Twinkies or vegetables, or you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like
Yeah.
you go to
How do
comfort
they,
food.
yeah, yeah. So how do they want to be healthy, right? That's
Yeah.
what we want to get people to. And I think maybe I'll explain. There are a couple, I've identified 4 triggers that really make us turn to comfort food when we don't want to, by using food as that comfort and relief when we really don't want to be. And so we have to address the needs contained in the reasons that we're turning to them. And do you want me to go over? This is basically why self-sabotage makes sense if we
Yes, absolutely.
understand food as
Thanks.
safety. Yeah.
That'd be
So
great.
and these are patterns that start in our youth, either with friends or family or church, or like I said, if you have, a part-time job or whatever. So the first, and the question that I always have clients ask is, what's at the tail end of my food noise? And food noise is that I should eat this, I shouldn't, I don't want to be, but oh, it looks so good, and I'm hungry, all those things.
Yeah. We've all been there.
Yeah. Oh my God, totally. So the first one is, am I tired? And this starts when we are in our youth and we're really rewarded for food. So we're 80s kids. I don't know if you guys had Book It, but that's one example of one way I was rewarded with food. Book It was this program started by Pizza Hut that if you read 5 books, you got a free personal pan pizza. Do either of you remember?
Whoa, what a
Yeah,
motivator. I didn't have that.
Yeah, me neither. Where'd you grow up?
Pittsburgh.
Oh yeah, they didn't have it in New York.
No wonder they're so knowledgeable there.
Yeah. But or like, I remember being in swimming lessons and being afraid to jump off the diving board. And my dad
Me
would say,
too.
yeah. And my dad was like, Allie, we'll stop at, Dunkin' Donuts if you jump off the diving board. And it was like, run and cannonball. It was like, oh my God, I will override this fear. So what happens is we end up like equating food with accomplishment, right? Even like I played softball, and after a game, we would all get like a soda and and like Doritos or like snack pack, right? Of some like, again, non-food, but that you thought was food. So then what happens as adults is we become so tired because we're trying to accomplish during the day. And there's a need in there for rest. And so we often turn to food because we say, I deserve this because I've been accomplishing all day. Or we often use sugar to power through so that we can accomplish more.
Mm.
So bored. Yeah.
Yeah. Because one of the ways we can get rest is emotional rest. And if we're bored, we're not getting emotional rest, right?
Yeah.
So that's one example. The A in tail is anxiety. And this is really when uncertainty comes from the outside. And so food becomes a refuge for us, a way of feeling grounded. So I gave the example of my dad, right? He cried I love my dad. And it created this uncertainty around food. A lot of my clients, their home was unstable. So these were things that we took as normal, that often we wouldn't think were traumatic or stressful, but they were just the norms. One of my clients had a really like just chaotic, loving, but chaotic upbringing brought on by financial instability. But whenever they would go out to eat, it was like that was the happy place, right? That was when everyone got along, there were no fights. And so when things become uncertain, we can look at this with COVID, right? A lot of us don't know how to navigate that uncertainty. And so we turn to food as a way to feel grounded.
Yeah, it's a great example.
Yeah. The I is when we start to feel inadequate. And this is when the doubt comes from the inside. So a lot of my clients growing up, they might have been the sibling in the family that did struggle with food. And they felt like their appetites were too big. But they also tended to struggle with something else. Maybe it was school, or they were different from the other people in their family in some way. And so in modern days, when they feel different, like, oh my God, why is this so hard for me at work? Or I don't know how to get started. Everyone else knows what to do at work. They stress, we call it's like procrastination eating, right? It's this sense of inadequacy that is driving the eating. And then there's the L, which is loneliness. And loneliness is really about when our social needs aren't being met. So we can have a lot of people around us, but not feel connected. And so anytime we feel this sense of separateness, and often if we struggle with food and body, if we're really honest with ourselves, we might be like, well, it's just my weight. But then there's also other things that make us feel separate, right? Like I was just with a client yesterday and she's like, I feel like my friends love me and they've never made me feel bad, but you know, I've made different decisions. I got married young. I really love being with my family. I don't want to do crazy wild traveling like they like to do. She's like, but it's just my weight. And I'm like, but you're separating yourself
Because
in
of your
other
weight.
ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, beyond the weight. So in each of those patterns, there's needs that need to be met as adults, but we didn't learn to identify those needs because we used food as coping strategies in our youth, and we're still using them today.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. Like, just going back as a child, like all these, well, I should say all these, but most of the things that happen to us as adults, you go back to when we were a child and how we associated with just not only food, but just life situations in general. What does it take for a person to take that pause and kind of really dive into that specifically around food? Because most people don't even do that with day-to-day life.
Yeah. Oh my God. Right. This is the $1 million question, Omar. So I think the first thing is asking yourself, why I call it unaligned eating choices, right? We can call them bad choices, frustrating eating choices. But I think the first question is to ask, why does this make sense? And the reason that I think it's so important to ask that is that if we've been struggling with food in our bodies for a long time, there's a lot of shame. And when there's shame there, we can't do an honest exploration of what we really need to understand. And I also think this question makes sense. Like asking this, it opens us up to possibilities that are really around relief and satisfaction, not more restriction, deprivation, and trying to be good the way we've been conditioned to be good. So if we're exhausted, right? Or like as Dr. Laura, you said, like, I'm really bored. It's like, okay, why does my eating make sense when I'm bored? Right. And like, some of
Hmm.
I'm thinking of a specific client. It's like, oh, I just want things to be different. I don't want to be in this job. I'm thinking of a specific client. Oh, okay. You don't want to be in a job. Well, that makes this job makes sense. You want a fulfilling job. Okay. Right. But rather than saying, what's my problem for wanting to eat when I'm bored, right? Like you don't get any good information that way.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm just also wondering if a lot of this is a habit, that we have the same thought patterns every day and we follow the same routine and you know we get bored with certain activities, we get up and we go eat or whatever. And I don't know, what are your feelings about that?
I want to just before you jump into that, alley. I think that's a phenomenal question because I think that also happens with people's food choices, and they eat the same thing every every day, maybe every meal, like,
Yeah.
so yeah, it is a habit. So yeah, Ali, go ahead and knock that
Yeah.
one out the park. I'm a good question.
Yeah. Well,
Thanks.
no, I like that you say that because if we ask what makes sense, we start to realize like that the need we have these needs and then we put negative judgment on it. So like if we have a need for novelty, right? But what do we do around food? We eat the same thing and we get bored, but we think we have to eat the same thing that is depriving and like healthy and we don't like it. And then we think the novelty we need is like, oh, this is just boring. I need something exciting. And so then we go for the food that food manufacturers have made to excite our system, right? Rather than being like, okay,
On
I just need,
purpose. Yeah.
yes, on purpose, rather than like, oh, I just need to change this up, right? Versus thinking everything about our food and our habits are problematic. So I think I'm glad you brought up the board, like the boredom with food, Omar. But yeah, Dr. Lori, I think a lot of this is habits. However, I think and there's some neuroplasticity there and that. And starting habits and stopping bad habits tend to be different processes. So I think the deep sustainable change comes when we really start to identify differently, like rather than thinking we really do have a food problem or not enough willpower or whatever. um it starts with like, maybe I can see this differently. And what's really interesting about the new research around sustainable eating and exercise change is that it's in its own category, and that what we really need to be supporting people around is flexibility and not habit hacking, habit stacking, as I call it like the
Mm.
bro hacking, because the more roles that someone has in their life, the less predictable circumstances they have. So, you guys are podcasters, business owners, parents, spouse, partner, pet. I have a dog, right?
Oh, that's the issue.
Yeah.
Issues.
It's like no day, like we have some
Yeah.
routines, but like nothing is the same ever. And so really trying to think like, oh, I need to eat this way all the time, or I need to exercise, the same way all the time. Is it really just isn't practical for real life. So I think really starting to understand how change actually works can start to have us understand, oh, maybe these habits can change and they are just kind of automatic pilot, but I need to bring some awareness of what's really at the root of them instead of I just love food too much, which is tends to be what my clients think. Or I
Yeah.
don't have enough willpower or discipline.
Point.
Yeah, no, very good point. So what would be the like first step if someone was seeking your services? What is the first step that you kind of put them on the path when they really understand that they're trying to make the change, develop some good habits or mindset shifts? What is the first thing that you tend to do?
Yeah. Well, I just want to put a asterisk there is that I think we need to understand, because when we've been struggling with food, we often feel really separate and like, why can't I figure this out? And at least my clients, like I've read all the things, right? But like reading more doesn't necessarily make us change. So I just really think
That
it's,
is a fact.
yeah. Yeah. My
All the
background,
self-help books in the world haven't changed a lot.
yeah.
And
My
diet books
background,
too.
yeah. My background is actually in adult change, and adults actually learn best through experience, not through learning. So a lot of how health information is delivered just doesn't work for adults, right? Like when we're kids we'll study to get an A on the test, but you know adults are like, okay, I have all these other competing commitments, like
Mhm.
I need some like a real shift fast. But I think it's important to realize, because when I was struggling with food, I was like, I'm the only one. This is so hard. I'm broken. And really understand that the process of change isn't personal. Everyone has to go through the same steps and the same process. And I'll talk about that. But this is just what everyone has to do. So I think the first thing is, again, asking why does this make sense starts to open up some self-compassion. It starts to repair the trust that is often lost when we haven't been successful at changing something we really want. Then the next thing I think is really clarity, in asking what's at the tail end of my food choices and really identifying what is your main trigger. Now, we might have all of them, but we tend to have one trigger that is really prominent, and the one that it's like, oh my God, this is the causing the most pain in my life. Then after that, I think we need to accept that we need to show up like an awkward beginner.
Yeah.
And I think this is the part that no one likes, that I hate personally. I don't, you guys are both competent. I don't know about you, but I hate feeling like a novice.
Right.
No, I mean that's
Yeah.
something, especially in the diet world, like people who have down this further along the path, that you kind of forget that feeling, but it's a very valid feeling. We talk about,
Uh-huh.
New Year's resolutions and those people who try to go in the gym and it's like, I don't want to look like the person who doesn't know what they're
Yeah,
doing in the
Right.
gym and they quit.
exactly. Exactly. But I think once we identify like what the trigger is, it's like, right, okay, I'm feeling inadequate, right? Oh man, for some of my clients, it's like, oh, this is not news to me. Other clients are like, oh my God. And like I feel really confident unless I'm not 100% guns blazing confidence, then I'm shocked that I'm, not confident.
Mhm.
So when it comes to the hard thing, whether it's learning to be moderate, learning to, cook new vegetables,
Hmm.
it's like, okay, I have to be willing to be an awkward beginner at this, and that's okay. And I think in this stage of the change process, it's just about showing up. And for some of us, I can give my own example. When I went through menopause and I was postpartum at the same time, and I had plantar fasciitis, I had insomnia.
Oh, yeah.
A year later, I was 30 pounds above my pre-pregnancy weight, which was like, how did this happen? Because I had a super healthy pregnancy, easy pregnancy, went in really healthy. And I had to work on getting help. I was like, I should know this. This is my thing. What is going on? But I didn't know anything about menopause. I didn't know enough about strength training, all the things I had to do. So it can be getting,
Hormones are really where it's at when it comes to weight loss.
oh my God, so much, so much.
So
Well,
important.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I didn't know what I didn't know. And I felt like I
Right.
should know it. Right. So I'm just sharing, like, I've just been on that journey with everyone else the past 3 years, because this process you just repeat over and over. So show up like an awkward beginner. It's everyone hates it and you just got to do it. But I think that just showing up in the beginning with whatever it is really, really important. And then we also have this like human tendency to think like, oh, how I feel now is how I'm going to feel always. But if you just show up within a couple of weeks, you're going to start making some progress. And this is the other important, this is then I tell my clients, let's start focusing on momentum, not consistency, because consistency implies you have to do the same thing every day. But let's focus on momentum. So if you're working on exercise, right? Let's expand that to movement. The need is movement. When we focus on needs, we can get more flexible and expansive choices. So if you're traveling for work and you can't get to, to the gym class you like, let's maintain momentum. Let's just, how do you walk? How do you do some push-ups? What is accessible? Just so that you're not coming back and feeling like total inertia,
Crummy.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like if you're eating, right? It's like, again, focusing on the need of blood sugar. Okay, if I know my macros, I don't need to eat the exact meal plan that I always eat. I know how to do good enough. And what happens in this the muddle that we call it in Truce with Food, right? Like any book or movie you love, you remember the beginning and the end, but you don't remember the middle, right? It's like, it's just kind of like, who knows what happens there? But a couple of things that are really important happen here. First, you start to discover your own reasons for change. And some of the new research on eating and exercise behavior change shows that most people equate eating and exercise with weight loss, even if they want to get healthy in terms of resolving anxiety or depression or just to feel overall better, more energy. Because of our culture and the norms that we're in, is it's going to be tied to weight loss. This only counts, right, if the scale's not moving. And adults actually need relatively quick results to stick with something. And so when I talk about quick results, I'm talking about clients noticing, oh, I slept so much better. Oh my God, my energy is through the roof. Oh my God, the big one is I don't have cravings anymore, like physical cravings, Oh, my life is getting easier when I do this, not harder. And that's really where you start to unlearn that health is full of restriction and deprivation. And you start to really want to make the healthy choice here. And that's important because adults need to be self-directed. Like, not, sometimes I hear in the emotional eating space, oh, you're inner rebel. It's like, no, we all have a rebel when our autonomy is taken away from us as adults. And so here we really start to discover the reasons for change that we want to make that have immediate impact in our life, and not just potentially if we look good because we've lost weight. The other thing that happens in this model is that you learn to be a really great friend to yourself, even when you have setbacks. And this is where adult emotional safety really starts to accelerate. Is, oh my God, I can be nice to myself when I'm struggling. I can give myself rest, even though I'm not, I wish I could exercise today, but I'm thinking of myself, I didn't sleep well last night. So this is where you really learn to be your own best friend. And I think that's what the most practical version of adult safety is like, I got my own back here, and I can,
Love it.
and this is where we also accept things are going to take you longer than you think. It's not you, it's everybody. And this is also where you surprise yourself, where you have those breakthroughs. And so this is a really valuable place. And then basically, when you come out of that muddle, you end up at a completely new place that I think you will surprise yourself with. And then you're at a new place that you need to start all over again with. So I can give you an example of this. Again, it's my most recent one, but becoming postpartum and having insomnia and all this stuff, I was like, okay, I was like, I just need to start moving again. And this was during COVID. And I mean, I was walking my son, like that was all there was to do. People were like, you walk so much, but I needed to improve my muscle mass. Right. And I had a couple of false starts. Right. But it was like, you just have to show up. I injured myself, which was part of my problem. Then I got COVID, but it was like, okay, you just need to show up. And I hired a trainer who could help me rebuild my body in perimenopause and postpartum. And then in 6 months, I was loving strength training. I would have never believed that I would have loved that. And I was like, I'm just here to like get into shape and exercise, like move because it's the right thing to do. But after 6 months, I had lost 10 pounds. I had so much more energy. And then I wanted to actually start challenging myself at the gym. It wasn't just about like getting out of like pain and getting more energy. It was like, oh, I want to do box jumps. Oh, I couldn't climb those ropes in the 6th grade gym class because I told myself I was too fat. Could I do it as an adult? And so you start to have a new set of goals that are really about challenging yourself versus just getting relief. But they're chosen goals based on what's accessible in your life and what's up for you next.
That's a great point, and that's something that I
Yes.
think a lot of people start to fall into those ruts and not, I don't want to call it reinventing themselves, but really just opening up doors that could open up different possibilities that you can keep that momentum, like you were saying, Ali. So, thanks for all of this today. It's been a fantastic discussion. So, can you do us a favor and just let us know how we can keep in touch with all the good stuff that you're doing, your website, your social media handles, and just any way that we could keep up with all that
Where
you're
is
doing.
Ali?
Yeah. Yeah, my website is at alishapiro.com, and I do host a free monthly community gathering. If people are interested in this, you can go to alishapiro.com/gathering, and it's just for questions, open Q&A for where people are on their journey. So that's an option. And then I am on Instagram, and I'm at Ali, ALIM Shapiro, SHAPIRO.
Well,
Awesome,
thank
awesome.
you. Thank you. You've been so wonderful and, kind of like the lighthouse out there in this
Oh,
in this world.
well, thank
So
you. Thank you.
appreciate you, Ali.
Well, I appreciate you both. And to Dr. Lori, I'll just add this, my initial weight gain was from pesticide exposure. I didn't know it was a huge uncertainty trigger for me, and
Oh,
it was because of inflammation. And so the work that you're doing to really help people understand that, how
that
important
is
inflammation is life changing once you
th-
can identify that. So, and you too, Omar, with
thank
all the coaching
you.
you're doing.
That's
Oh,
so
no, thank
great.
you.
So nice of you, Ali. And thank you for putting that out there. The pesticide use is just rampant. No wonder we're all getting fat.
Right. Right.
It's
That's why it's like,
amazing.
Can the willpower narrative please die? It's keeping us
Yeah.
blind to
Yeah,
what's really going on.
exactly.
Yeah, no,
Well,
absolutely.
thank you so much. Appreciate you. And I know our audience does as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of This Podcast Burns Fat. We're so excited to have you as a listener, and we're hoping that you've really enjoyed the content as well. And if you did, please run over to iTunes and provide a rating and or review. It will go a long way in helping us continuously build our listenership up so that we could provide you with excellent content regarding fat loss, weight management, and just an overall healthy lifestyle. Thanks so much. Have a great night.